Before Galactus showed up hungry, before Dr. Doom brought the royal drama, there was Moleman, the very first villain against the Fantastic Four ever since their inception back in 1961. And now, after decades of lurking in comic panels and animated episodes, the guy's finally getting his live-action debut in the upcoming Fantastic Four movie. Harvey Elder might look like a hunchbacked and socially awkward guy, but he's got a whole kingdom under the earth and a giant chip on his shoulder. And let's be real, Marvel didn't just pick him at random for the reboot. There's a reason this guy kicked off Marvel's first family. His origin, his twisted genius, all of it shaped what kind of villains the Fantastic Four would battle for decades. Time to dig into the wild world of the one and only Moleman. Let's get into it. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who is Moleman in Marvel Comics? Moleman, whose full name is Harvey Rupert Elder, is one of Marvel's oldest and strangest supervillains. He didn't come from a lab and wasn't born with powers. What he did have was a brilliant scientific mind and a deep bitterness towards society. Before he became the ruler of an underground world, Harvey was a ridiculed scientist. His odd appearance earned him endless mockery from his peers. That rejection drove him to retreat from the surface world entirely. In his obsessive search for a mythical place he believed was located deep within the earth, Harvey stumbled upon a vast, ancient network of underground civilizations and monster-infested tunnels called Subterranean. There, instead of dying or going mad, he thrived. The harsh environment twisted him further, both physically and psychologically, and thus he took on the name Moleman, embracing the monster society had always seen him as. What makes Moleman stand out is that he became the absolute monarch of Subterraneia, commanding bizarre monsters like the monstrous Giganto and wielding the loyalty of various subterranean races, including the Moloids. His first major act on the world stage was attacking the surface with a giant monster in Fantastic Four #1, which makes him the first supervillain to go toe-to-toe with Marvel's first family. Despite his oddball nature, Moleman has remained a staple of the Marvel Universe for over 60 years. And no, he's not a straight-up megalomaniac. He's more of a tragic figure, a genius who turned away from humanity because humanity turned on him first. And in Marvel's long list of villains, that makes him stand out in a surprisingly human way. What drove Harvey Elder to become Moleman? Long before he was Moleman, Harvey Elder worked as a government scientist and mineralogist. As said before, Elder often proposed radical theories about the Earth's structure, including the existence of vast underground civilizations. But instead of being celebrated for thinking outside the box, he was labeled the crackpot. That rejection was personal, because Elder had always been judged for appearances and odd mannerisms. Eventually, he snapped and left society behind entirely. He then boarded a ship and traveled across the globe to prove his theories right. His journey brought him to Monster Island, where a massive crevice led deep into the earth. Normally, any other guy would turn his back, but Moleman wasn't your average Joe. He decided to descend alone, and what awaited him was Subterraneia. More on that later, but his contact with that environment began altering him due to exposure to unknown radiation. Either that or the lack of light and constant danger twisted his body and mind. But for Elder, this was the ultimate transformation that he was waiting for, perhaps all his life. In the underground world that everyone said didn't exist, he found vindication. No more rejection, no more ridicule. In that moment, Harvey Elder was gone. It's almost as if he shed his identity like a snakeskin and embraced the persona of Moleman, the ruler of the dark beneath. What drove him wasn't evil, it was pain. The kind of pain that festers into obsession, and once he tasted control in Subterraneia, there was no going back to the surface. Not as Harvey Elder, and certainly not as a man. What is Subterraneia, and why is Moleman its ruler? Subterraneia is what you get if you took every weird sci-fi idea about what's under the Earth's surface. You may think monsters, lava lakes, creepy ancient ruins, devil's hell. Subterranean made all of that feel real. It's not just one cave or tunnel system either. We're talking miles and miles of underground madness. There are forgotten civilizations buried in there, glowing rock walls, mushroom forests the size of buildings, and straight-up kaiju sleeping in the dark. Most people would take one look and say, nope, out of here immediately. Moleman lived in that chaos. He looked at all that chaos and went, yeah, I live here now. The guy shows up, gets attacked by creatures, even nearly dies, and somehow turns it all into an empire. He tames the monsters, makes the little moloid people worship him, and plants his flag like some kind of mole-themed dictator. And they actually follow him, probably because he's the first guy who didn't scream and run away from them. Why is he the ruler? Because he claimed it and basically scared everyone else into line. It's not a democracy down there, so don't be surprised. Plus, he's hoarded ancient tech, controls every inch of the terrain, and can make half a city vanish with a well-timed cave-in. Subterranea isn't just his hideout, it's his personal doomsday button. Every time Moleman pops up, you better believe something's gonna get wrecked. And what's wild is half the time, nobody even knows where the attack came from. He hits you from underground and disappears into a tunnel. Dude literally rules a kingdom people forgot even exists. Until it's too late. What makes Moleman so dangerous, despite his appearance? Okay, let's be honest. If you saw Moleman walking down the street, you wouldn't think supervillain. You'd probably think, is that guy okay? Should someone help him cross the road? He's tiny, wears a green onesie with a belt that looks like it's from a Spirit Halloween rack, and those thick goggles? They're not for show. He's practically blind, but that's the trap. The moment you underestimate him, that's when the giant monster breaks through your office floor and eats your car. Moleman doesn't fight like other villains. He doesn't throw punches. He throws cities off balance. He knows geology like a chef knows his spice rack. Fault lines, sinkholes, structural weakness, that's his version of combat. He will literally collapse your life, starting with the ground under your feet. And let's not forget the beasts. Ever heard of Giganto? Imagine a whale, give it legs, slap some scales on it, and now imagine Moleman controlling it like a pet. That's one of dozens. He's also picked up some absurd ancient tech over the years. We're talking lost civilizations and teleporters built by people who probably didn't even have a written language. He collects these like Pokemon cards, and somehow knows exactly when to use them. He's not out to rob banks or build a giant laser. He's trying to prove a point. He wants everyone up here to feel just as small and powerless as he felt before he vanished underground. That kind of grudge, it doesn't fade away so easily. It festers. So yeah, laugh at the mole costume, joke about his sunglasses, but don't be shocked when a tunnel opens up under your building and suddenly you're living in Subterranea rent-free. What are Moleman's physical traits and limitations? Moleman isn't exactly what you'd call superhero material at first glance. He's short and hunchbacked. Somewhat even looks like he lost a fight with gravity. His skin's pale, which kinda makes sense considering he hasn't seen sunlight in decades and wears these thick, bug-eyed goggles. Well, not to be surprised, the guy's almost completely blind. Spending most of your life in total darkness will do that. But instead of letting that be a weakness, his body just adapted. Moleman is surprisingly nimble when he's on home turf. Above ground, he's slow, awkward, out of place. But below, he's like a mole in a maze he built himself. He knows every twist, every pitfall. That knowledge gives him an edge that most powered-up villains can't match. Also, have you noticed how his face is rarely drawn clearly? In a lot of comics, it's either hidden in shadows or exaggerated to look more monstrous than human. Like, we know he used to be a man named Harvey Elder, but now he's something else entirely. Something the surface world doesn't recognize anymore. That distorted face is perhaps a reminder that Moleman isn't coming back for redemption. He belongs to the deep now. Limitations and all, that's where he's king. Does Moleman have any superpowers? Technically, no. Moleman doesn't shoot lasers from his eyes or bench press buildings. But if you think he's powerless, you are seriously underestimating just how weird and effective his adaptations are. After spending years living in absolute darkness, Harvey Elder's eyesight shot to hell, but the rest of his senses cranked up to 11. He can hear tiny shifts in air pressure, detect faint sounds from miles away in a tunnel, even sense vibrations in the ground. So if someone's coming, He knows before they do. He's also developed a weird resistance to light-based attacks. Blinding flashes that would fry someone's corneas barely faze him. His goggles help filter out extreme brightness, but even without them, he's built up a tolerance. Still, none of that compares to his true edge, which is his command over subterranean technology. Moleman has access to all kinds of ancient devices left behind by pre-human civilizations and deviant experiments, and he understands them like no other. He's basically the only guy on Earth who can reverse engineer tech that's older than recorded history and still make it work. That's a kind of superpower in its own right. So while you won't see him flying or lifting tanks, Moleman is dangerous because of what he's learned and built. Give him a cave, a monster, and a few gadgets, and he'll bring an entire city to its knees without ever setting foot above ground. How does Moleman control his monster army? Moleman runs his monsters like a military unit. You've got kaiju-sized freaks like Giganto, the triple-headed dragon, Tricephalus, and a whole parade of unnamed subterranean nightmares. These are your ancient, biologically engineered deviant creations. Think massive, genetically modified creatures designed for war and chaos. So how does a half-blind guy in green pajamas boss them around? Well, with a mix of brains and tech. First, he's mastered the ancient deviant control systems and signal-based emitters. They use frequency-based commands tuned to each creature's biology, which means he can basically hijack their instincts and override their aggression with signals they can't ignore. Some of the more volatile monsters are kept in check using conditioning chambers, massive underground labs where Moleman and his moloids have spent years training them. Then there's the fear factor. Moleman's been down there long enough that he's become a legend among his own beasts. They know what happens when they disobey. He's not afraid to unleash stronger monsters to punish the weaker ones. There's a chain of command, and Moleman sits at the top like a mafia boss. But the wildest part is that these creatures respect him. He knows how they think, what triggers their rage, and how to channel that into destruction where and when he wants it. That's why when the Moleman attacks, it's a coordinated strike from an underground warlord with an army of walking, extinction-level events. What is Moleman's ultimate goal? Look, Moleman doesn't want to rule the galaxy or build a death ray on the moon. He's not Thanos. He's not even Doom. He wants something petty, and honestly, kind of relatable. Revenge. Not just get-even revenge, the long-term hold a grudge till the end of time kind of revenge. His beef is with the entire surface world, and honestly, you can't even blame him much. We're aware that Harvey Elder was mocked for how he looked and laughed out of rooms for his theories. People probably ignored him because they thought he was weird. Which, to be fair, he kind of was. But after getting tossed aside, this guy went into a fit and decided not to talk to anyone again. I mean, we all have those moments where we just want the earth to swallow us, but this guy actually followed through. He dug deep enough to find his way, quite literally, till he found a kingdom and crowned himself King of the Misfits. But just vibing in his underground empire wasn't enough, so every attack Moleman launches at the surface is basically him yelling, "Who's laughing now?" while sending a skyscraper-sized monster to punch a nuclear facility. If we really think about it, his ultimate goal was to prove everyone wrong and replace this unfair world as we know it with his own. One where he's in charge, where the freaks and weirdos have the power, and the people who used to mock him are busy running from Giganto. That's the thing about Moleman. He's not trying to be evil, he's trying to make a point. His revenge is geological, and honestly, that's kind of iconic. What was Moleman's role in Fantastic Four #1? You know how movies usually take a while before throwing a villain at the heroes? Fantastic Four #1 didn't waste a single page. Moleman shows up right out of the gate like, "Hey, I've got monsters and a plan, let's dance." This issue was the comic book birth of a new kind of villain, one who wasn't just evil, but hurt. Here's the breakdown. Nuclear plants across the world are mysteriously going kaboom. Governments are panicking. Scientists are baffled. Buildings are just gone. The Fantastic Four start investigating and follow a trail that leads to Monster Isle, where, surprise, surprise, Moleman's been lurking like a Bond villain. He doesn't want money, but rather revenge on the surface world, and he plans to do it using massive monsters like Giganto that literally tunnel under nuclear facilities and destroy them from below. That's some next-level sabotage. And let's talk tone. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby gave us someone with a tragic backstory, a weird lair, terrifying beasts, and a plan rooted in something way more human than world domination: bitterness. It was all about what happens when a brilliant but broken person is pushed too far. Moleman really set the blueprint for the list of villains. Sci-fi meets emotion meets monster mayhem. He walked, well tunneled, so Doom, Magneto, and Loki could run. Has Moleman ever fought other heroes? Oh, Moleman's beef isn't just with the Fantastic Four. No, this guy's got an equal opportunity grudge. He's gone toe-to-toe with a laundry list of Marvel heroes, and despite looking like he wandered off a rejected Lord of the Rings casting call, he's held his own more than once. Take the Avengers, for example. Moleman once tried to sink New York again and ran headfirst into Earth's mightiest heroes. He brought the monsters and kept them dancing, as we can imagine. Then there's Iron Man, who's had to dig his way out of Moleman's traps more than once because apparently repulsor blasts don't help when the floor turns into a sinkhole. He's even clashed with the X-Men during an incident involving a mutant child who got lost underground, because of course that happens when Moleman's got tunnels everywhere. And well, he has fought with Namor a lot. Turns out, when Moleman tries to claim parts of the ocean floor, the guy who calls himself the Submariner takes that personally. Even She-Hulk once got into a courtroom-turned-kaiju brawl with Moleman during her solo comic run, because why settle for legal drama when you can add a giant monster, right? And no matter who you are, fighting someone who controls the ground under your feet is never fun. What are some of Moleman's signature weapons and tools? If Batman has a utility belt, Moleman has an entire garage of underground weapons. For a guy who lives in a rock hole, this guy's got a tech game which is surprisingly on point. First off, there's the seismic staff, which is a glowing, gadget-tipped cane that lets him trigger localized quakes. He uses it like a conductor's baton, but for collapsing buildings. It's part weapon, part authority symbol, but bad news if you're standing too close. Then there are his digging and tunneling machines. Some look like drills, some look like metal worms, but all of them can cut through miles of bedrock and pop up in places like a giant evil jack-in-the-box. That's how he invades cities from below. He's also got monster control devices, usually wrist-mounted or staff-based, which emit specific sonic frequencies to wrangle beasts like Giganto or Tricephalus. Some comics even show him using gravity-altering tech just to mess with battlefields. And don't let his ragged cloak fool you, because underneath it, he's usually got gear built into his outfit. It's a mix of wizard cosplay and doomsday prepper. Nothing flash, but everything functional. What makes Moleman a tragic villain? The earliest supposed record of Harvey's childhood dates back to the time when he was just a little kid. As per his grandmother, Harvey was normally introverted, but really enjoyed the holiday season. One time around Christmas, the department store Santas shunned him. To cheer up the little boy, his grandfather Robert often dressed up as Santa, which brought a little bit of joy in Harvey's otherwise miserable life. When life has handed you too many lemons, you stop trying to make lemonade after a point, because you're tired. That's what happened to our Moleman. He isn't your typical bad guy plotting world domination just because he likes chaos. We've seen the loneliness in his story, like the classic misunderstood outcast who never really quite found a place to call home. This pain transformed into bitterness, and ultimately, exile. In the dark tunnels of Subterraneia, surrounded by monsters and lost civilizations, he finally found something he never had above ground: acceptance. Because the Subterranean beasts didn't care what he looked like. They accepted him as their king. That acceptance, even if from monstrous creatures, filled the loneliness and gave him purpose. Sometimes that's all a person with no hope needs to survive. This emotional core makes Moleman tragic. His attacks on the surface are cries for recognition, for respect, for justice in his own twisted way. In the end, Moleman is a villain shaped by deep wounds, making him one of Marvel's most emotionally complex and frankly relatable characters. How has Moleman's legacy shifted over time? When Moleman first showed up in Fantastic Four #1 back in 1961, he was mostly seen as a quirky, almost goofy villain. You know the type, a disgruntled guy with a grudge. His weird appearance, along with giant beasts, made him memorable, but also a bit of a comic book oddball. Early on, he was mostly a one-dimensional antagonist, the underground madman who sends monsters to wreck the surface world. But over the decades, writers started digging deeper, pun intended, into his character. Stories began focusing on his loneliness and his feelings of rejection. Some narratives even have him reluctantly teaming up with heroes like the Fantastic Four or Namor when the survival of Subterraneia is at stake. These alliances reveal a complex character who is motivated by a desire to protect the only home and people he's ever known. Modern takes on Moleman highlight his psychological depth, and he appears to be more than just the creepy monster guy. Has Moleman ever appeared outside of comics? While Moleman might not be a household name like Magneto or Loki, he has popped up beyond the pages of comic books. One of his more notable appearances was in the animated series Fantastic Four: World's Greatest Heroes from 2006, where his subterranean menace translated well to the small screen. His monster army and underground realm made him a natural fit for animation, where his visual oddities could come alive. He's also featured in various Marvel video games and animated specials as a mid-level villain who brings chaos. Though he's never headlined a major live-action movie, Moleman has been on Marvel's radar for a while. Early drafts and rumors hinted at his inclusion in previous Fantastic Four adaptations, but nothing ever stuck. Now, with the 2025 Fantastic Four reboot, Moleman might finally get his big screen debut as the primary antagonist. It makes sense too, since he's tied to the roots of the Fantastic Four as their first ever foe. So while Moleman's still mostly underground in terms of pop culture, it looks like he's gearing up for a serious moment in the spotlight. Marvelous verdict. Moleman might not be the flashiest villain in Marvel's lineup, but his story is one of the most compelling. He might have evolved over the years to a tragic anti-hero status, but his story tells us that those living in the shadows have stories worth telling. So next time you think of Marvel villains, don't forget the mole-shaped mastermind who rules beneath our feet. What do you think? Are you ready to root for the Underground King? Let me know in the comments section below. And if you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more such marvelous deep dives. Until then, stay sharp, stay safe. We'll catch you in the next one.